You're progressive in one way, but you're still making that fucking backward story of seven dwarves living in a cave. What the f are you doing, man? There's a lot of hypocrisy going on, I gotta say, from being somebody who's a little bit unique.
Is it possible for one of Disney's most iconic fairy tales to ignite a controversy so intense it overshadows the story's legendary magic? That's exactly what happened when the studio decided to breathe new life into Snow White, only to be met with rumors, accusations, and behind-the-scenes turmoil so monumental that many began calling it the Snow White disaster. From the moment this ambitious remake was announced, tensions simmered beneath the surface. Fans were ecstatic to see how the filmmakers would update a classic, yet no one could have predicted the whirlwind of changes, last-minute rewrites, and swirling controversies that would come to define this project. By the time the final version of Snow White reached theaters, it was burdened with one of the rockiest paths imaginable, leaving Rachel Zegler and Peter Dinklage at the center of a debate about representation, creative missteps, and who exactly was to blame for it all. Much of the discussion began when word got out that Disney had cast the talented Rachel Zegler in the lead role.
So did you go directly from West Side? Like, did you have to audition for Snow White, or like, oh, they saw you in West Side Story, they're like, you're Snow White?
West Side Story was kind of nowhere near coming out. We were about like 6 months away from release and no footage had been seen.
At first, it seemed like a fresh, forward-thinking decision. The studio was committed to hiring a diverse actress to portray one of the most celebrated characters in animation history. Yet, as soon as the public got a taste of this modern retelling, questions started swirling. The film promised to address the dated elements in the classic 1937 cartoon, presumably by discarding tired tropes and breathing new energy into the storyline. But what precisely would be changed and what would remain untouched? Those were the questions fans eagerly asked, as rumor after rumor spun out of control. Early on, insiders hinted at a vision full of promise. The production team reportedly aimed for a tone that was half fairy tale wonder, half modern empowerment tale, with glimpses of comedic moments that might surprise and delight audiences. Disney had shown a propensity for reimagining its animated catalog, sometimes to great box office success, other times with middling results. Yet Snow White was Disney's original crown jewel, the film that essentially kickstarted the studio's global reputation. Adapting it was no small task, and for many fans, the news of a live-action version felt like a long-awaited event. Social media platforms lit up with enthusiastic discussions. Some praised the idea of a Latina actress in the titular role, seeing it as an overdue step toward inclusivity.
It does seem like the media have got the throw her under the bus green light, though, when we're posting things like this. We're slagging her off behind the scenes, we're dropping all the information, and then reminding you of, her attacking the majority of the population of America when she posted F the Orange Man.
Others insisted on a faithful representation, worried that messing too much with the original narrative could tarnish the magic of Snow White's gentle innocence and the dwarf's whimsical charm. For a while, speculation thrived on the intriguing possibility of a retelling that could successfully blend tradition and progress. Rachel Zegler, who rose to prominence thanks to her role in a high-profile musical, looked poised to take her stardom to the next level with a part as momentous as Snow White. Then, practically out of nowhere, renowned actor Peter Dinklage voiced some fervent concerns. Known for his commitment to nuanced portrayals, especially when it comes to the depiction of little people, Dinklage didn't hold back. He criticized what he saw as a reluctance in Hollywood to abandon outdated depictions that might reinforce stereotypes. Although he recognized Disney's strides in casting someone like Zegler, he also pointed out the irony of continuing to perpetuate the seven dwarfs dynamic, one that could be seen as regressive if handled carelessly. His remarks immediately sparked heated debates online. Some individuals lauded Dinklage for speaking truth to power, asserting that stories with dwarfs required a more careful, contemporary approach.
Snow White reviews are in. Snow White, how should we say? Data points are in, because we now know that it was a flop.
Others insisted he was going overboard. After all, the seven dwarfs had been beloved for decades, iconic characters who might be updated without being erased. Why throw the baby out with the bathwater, they argued, when the dwarfs could simply be modernized? There was an undercurrent of tension. Had Dinklage effectively forced Disney to question a storyline that had been central to Snow White's identity for generations? Almost overnight, the studio found itself tiptoeing through a minefield. If they presented the dwarfs as they were in the original, they'd risk accusations of insensitivity, but if they changed them too much, they'd betray longtime fans. Dinklage's influence was undeniable. He had lit the fuse, and Disney appeared anxious to avoid a public relations meltdown. According to some reports, frantic discussions broke out in boardrooms, creative sessions were rescheduled, and script pages were revised. While all this unfolded, Rachel Zegler seemed to be caught in the middle. A fresh face on the Hollywood scene compared to some industry heavyweights, she was balancing a tricky situation.
Crying on that stage.
When am I not crying in public? It's so upsetting.
Why were you crying?
Oh my gosh, I saw well, we didn't even see. But I saw the logo and I went, that's my name, Snow White's up there.
How do you maintain excitement about your groundbreaking casting while your film is suddenly overshadowed by debates on representation and stereotypes? People online took sides, some praising Zegler's inclusive casting, others accusing Disney of virtue signaling. Then came the speculation that Zegler herself was becoming uneasy about the film's direction. Zegler's critics argued she was too inexperienced to handle the heightened scrutiny, or that she should have pushed back more aggressively if she truly disagreed with the rumored rewrites. Her supporters believed she was stuck doing her job as an actress, contractually bound to keep her opinions to herself in public until the film's official narrative was locked down. Either way, her name became inescapably tied to an adaptation that was quickly heading off the rails. Then came the test screenings, an event that could make or break any Hollywood production. Whispers emerged that these advanced showings for select audiences were not going well. Some viewers praised certain performances but slammed the disjointed tone. One scene might feel whimsical and reminiscent of the original fairy tale, while the next hammered home modern messages in a way that felt too heavy-handed.
You see yourself as the evil queen. You are not evil. You are not evil. You're a queen, but you're not evil. What was it like seeing yourself as the evil queen for the first time?
We did not see the clip.
Insiders described a film that didn't quite know what it wanted to be. A straightforward fairy tale or a social commentary disguised as family entertainment. Online chatter exploded. Could the film be re-edited in time to salvage its chance at success? Was the script going through last-minute rewrites even after significant portions had been shot? The rumor mill churned out every sort of speculation, from claims that entire sequences were scrapped to suggestions that major roles would be radically reimagined. For instance, would the dwarfs be magical creatures instead, or possibly trimmed down to background cameos so as not to risk any unflattering portrayals? Meanwhile, certain Twitter threads and gossip articles alleged that Rachel Zegler privately blamed Peter Dinklage for fueling much of this chaos. Supposedly, she felt that once Dinklage spoke out, the studio overcorrected, confusing the script and forcing them into a revision spiral that left the final product looking fractured. Whether these claims were accurate or mere speculation, they introduced a new dimension to the drama, a behind-the-scenes blame game, pitting star against star in the public's imagination. Behind Disney's usual polished exterior, one could almost sense the cracks forming. Anonymous sources hinted that various creative teams were locking horns. Some insisted on staying true to the tone of the classic fairy tale, preserving the dwarfs in a respectful, updated manner.
Just last week, the media and the shill influencers were trying to do everything they could to save Snow White from being a complete and total flop in the box office, and they failed miserably. This movie is already a complete and total disaster, and it is so bad that now even the media has to admit.
Others felt that the dwarfs were best avoided altogether to circumvent any controversy. So the rewrites continued. Each new draft seemed to reflect a tug-of-war between time-honored tradition and an eager desire to appear forward-thinking. Adding to the tension, rumors of additional controversies made the rounds. Some whispered about alleged friction between Zegler and certain production staff, with claims of heated discussions behind closed doors. Online conspiracies flourished, suggesting that Disney was stalling the film's release to rework major plot points, or that the dwarfs themselves might become near-invisible side characters in the final cut. Exaggerated or not, these rumors underscored how unsteady the ground had become under this massive production. The label Snow White Disaster began circulating on message boards, capturing the collective frustration. When the film finally arrived in theaters, the results were indeed polarizing, and in some cases, downright brutal. Early reviews ranged from mildly disappointed to scathingly critical.
This is one of the one days of the year, this and SantaCon, that I don't go out.
Oh, because you're scared? Oh.
Well, it gets very rowdy. I live in an area with a lot of bars and restaurants.
Some applauded the cast's efforts, noting that Zegler exuded sincerity in her performance, and acknowledging that many cast members tried hard to infuse life into their roles. But the script's disjointed nature was hard to ignore. Scenes felt stitched together, as if grappling with layers of conflicting objectives. One moment aimed for a timeless fairy tale innocence, the next tackled real-world social issues in a way that felt jarring. Peter Dinklage largely stayed out of the fray at this point, giving no major interviews discussing the film's final outcome. Meanwhile, fan forums picked apart every detail. Were the dwarfs tastefully portrayed or sidelined to a fault? Had the studio watered down the story to such an extent that it became a bland reflection of corporate anxiety? Could Zegler have spoken up or championed a clearer vision? Speculation only increased when a rumor, still unconfirmed, suggested that Zegler made private comments holding Dinklage responsible for the chaotic back and forth that derailed the film. It's worth noting that none of this was ever definitively proven.
Snow White, the toe-curlingly terrible live-action remake, has bombed so hard at the box office that even Paul Tassi had to admit it. It got $43 million, and there are very few ways to spin that.
Zegler herself remained measured in public statements. She thanked fans for their support, avoided direct references to the controversies, and focused on the positive aspects of working on a Disney film. But the rumor mill was relentless. No sooner had Snow White begun its theatrical run than fans began looking ahead. Who else might reimagine the iconic fairy tale in the future and do it more adeptly? The name Jenna Ortega popped up frequently, spurred by her rising star status and proven ability to handle nuanced roles that blend humor and depth. Online theorists ran wild with ideas about a new adaptation, one that might consciously avoid the pitfalls encountered by the Zegler version. Some fan casting suggestions described an alternate timeline where Ortega led a version of Snow White that didn't attempt such drastic rewrites, yet still made progressive choices. Possibly, the dwarfs would remain integral, but with personalities shaped to respect modern sensibilities, avoiding caricature. The idea was that subtle changes, rather than overhauls triggered by panic, could make the difference between an inclusive update and a messy, reactionary flop. Disney, for its part, kept official plans under wraps, but rumors sprouted that the studio might indeed consider an entirely separate Snow White adaptation.
Like, it was a really, really, really bad flop. Now, things I do for you guys. I went to Snow White over the weekend. I took my kids. I'll tell you, I'm not sure who was more bored.
If box office returns and merchandise sales didn't meet expectations. In a social media-driven environment, a single slump can be overshadowed by the promise of something new and exciting. Yet fans remained wary, aware that novelty alone might not solve the deeper issue. Hollywood needs clarity of vision when revisiting time-honored classics. Throughout this ordeal, the question lingered: who was truly at fault? Was it Disney for launching a project without a firm strategy on how to handle the dwarfs and other sensitive elements? Did Dinklage's outspoken stance cause the creative team to panic and toss out a workable approach, leading to an incoherent final product? Or were these controversies simply the natural byproduct of trying to modernize a nearly century-old tale in a cultural climate hypersensitive to representation issues? Some point to corporate caution as the real culprit. In an era when public perception can change overnight, the sudden pivot to appease everyone might have destroyed the film's sense of cohesion. Others see Peter Dinklage's input as valuable and necessary.
Oh my god, well, when you get to wear Sandy Powell, first of all, insane, and then you get to be lit by Mandy Walker, and Nadia Stacey designed your hair and makeup, it's like the most incredible thing in the world. And then all of a sudden you open your eyes and you watch the playback, which I never do.
He challenged Disney to think critically. In their view, the fiasco was the result of the studio ignoring legitimate concerns until the last minute. Then, there are those who believe the blame is broader, stretching across multiple decision-makers who each wanted to claim they were championing progress, only to deliver a muddled outcome. In any case, Rachel Zegler found herself in a precarious position. As the face of this adaptation, she shouldered praise and criticism alike, often shouldering more blame than perhaps was fair. The rumor that she privately singled out Dinklage was never substantiated by on-record statements, but the idea of it took on a life of its own. Fan discussions turned it into a separate narrative, one about two actors representing different interests in an ever-complicating conversation about progress, tradition, and whose voices matter most. At the end of the day, the Snow White disaster isn't just a cautionary tale about the pitfalls of trying to revise a beloved story, it's also a stark reminder that in the modern age, every statement, especially one from an influential figure like Peter Dinklage, can snowball into a full-blown crisis if not managed thoughtfully. Once the conversation about dwarfs, representation, and the direction of the remake began, it threatened to swallow every other aspect of the production. Rachel Zegler's experience reveals the complexities that come with stepping into a role as iconic as Snow White. Her casting initially generated hope, but the swirl of controversies quickly overshadowed what should have been a proud, career-defining moment.
I think it's fair to say that no one on the right side of America can stand the star of this movie. And yet, Christian, you've seen the movie, and it appears that the filmmakers cobbled together enough salvageable material to make the movie itself quite nice.
The consistent chatter about her rumored blame toward Dinklage underscores a deeper tension. Even well-intentioned steps toward inclusivity and modernization can crumble in the face of insufficient planning and reactionary overhauls. Hollywood has seen its share of remakes, reboots, and reimaginings. Some find that sweet spot between honoring the original and updating its framework for new audiences, while others, like this adaptation, get mired in confusion. Perhaps the biggest takeaway is that if a studio aims to retell a classic in a contemporary manner, it must develop a coherent strategy from the outset, one that respects the original story's core appeal and addresses concerns about representation without making abrupt, last-minute changes. Wherever the truth may lie, whether Dinklage's commentary truly triggered an overhaul, or whether Disney was destined for trouble regardless, this fiasco stands as a landmark in ongoing debates about Hollywood's future. Can beloved fairy tales be updated without losing their charm? Should studios stop relying on nostalgia and focus on fresh narratives?
You know, the original cartoon came out in 1937, and very evidently so. There is a big focus on her love story with a guy who literally stalks her. Yeah. Weird.
Is there a way to incorporate progressive ideals into ancient stories without fracturing them at the seams? These questions, sparked by the swirling controversies around Snow White, remain relevant far beyond this single production. Ultimately, we, the audience, decide whether we want a brand new story or a thoughtful adaptation that balances tradition with innovation. The rumored tension between Rachel Zegler and Peter Dinklage might or might not hold merit, but it captures the essence of the film's downfall. Once a beloved story becomes the site of creative confusion and public outcry, even the best talent and the most iconic brand name can't guarantee a happy ending. And so, as the dust settles on this adaptation, many look ahead, wondering how Disney and other studios will handle the next big remake. Will they learn from these missteps, introducing updates more organically, offering roles that break stereotypes without demolishing everything fans love about the source material? Or will we see more scramble, more blame games, and more half-hearted attempts to chase headlines with progress that ultimately backfires? No matter what happens next, the Snow White disaster leaves behind some pointed lessons. It reminds us that representation is crucial, but so is a considered, cohesive approach that honors the fantasy's original spirit. It shows that last-minute panic rarely leads to strong storytelling, and it proves that star power, no matter how bright, can't fix a script that doesn't know what it wants to say. In a world hungry for both nostalgia and progress, striking that balance is no easy feat. Yet perhaps that's the real magic trick Hollywood needs to master.